Welcome to this video on One Point Perspective, where we combine maths and art to learn how to create 3D objects using 2D shapes. So I'm just going to switch across to our other camera and you can see our finished product here. We've got our square that we draw, which we turn into a rectangular prism. We've got a triangle, which we turn into a triangular prism. We've got our cylinder that we turn into, we've got our circle that we turn into a cylinder. And we've got our squiggly fun shape here that we turn into a squiggly fun shaped object. So what you're going to need for this activity is, of course, a pencil, an eraser, a ruler, and something that you can create a nice circle with. Now, I've got a masking tape roll here. You want to have it reasonably small. You could use a water bottle if you so prefer, but I would suggest not using a protractor. You can use a compass, absolutely, that would be the preferred option, but a water bottle or a masking tape roll or a sticky tape roll, just as good for the moment. So we're going to recreate what the example is here, and I'm just going to grab a piece of paper and we're going to get started. So here we have our blank sheet of paper, and the first thing that we want to do is just find around about the middle point of the paper, which is about here. So that's just a rough guess. What I'm then going to do is simply rule a horizontal line. Now this horizontal line, we're not really going to use it that much in this exercise, but it's good to get used to because this is the horizon line for our 3D shapes. So in future videos, we'll learn more about the horizon line, but for the moment, I'm just going to get you to rule that line through your center point, and we're going to turn that into an X, so it's really super easy to see. Now we've got to come to the art part, and we're going to do a very rough, very light sketch of a square up here. So it's got to be light. Make sure that you are able to erase the lines. You don't want it to be dark. So here you can see me just sketching it in lightly because I'll come back to this in a sec and I'll make it better. But I just want to have it nicely sort of sketched there. And then I'm going to come across and do a triangle. Now the triangle you want to make reasonably tall-ish. So if I'm just going to stand up here so I can see what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do here is draw a line, making sure it's parallel to our horizon line. And as I'm doing that, I'm also going to figure out a point sort of middle to that, which I can draw down and draw down there. Something like that. The main thing that I want to watch out for is making sure that this edge, that line, isn't heading towards this X. Otherwise, it's going to be too hard for our drawing to be able to really get a nice 3D looking object. So an angle like this is fine. For the circle, I'm going to take my masking tape, I'm going to plop that down right there, and I'm just going to draw around the inside of it. Like so. There we go. Easy circle. And finally, we're going to do a squiggle line, so I'm going to go wee. This is always the fun part. Like that. So this is going to be interesting, and I'm just going to make this a little bit nice of a curve. There we go. And now I'm going to go back over each of these to do a much thicker line so that we've got a very precise shape to work with when we come to doing our 3D. So here's where I start to do my ruling up. And I'm just going back over this. Don't worry if it's not an exact square, because we're really just thinking about the shape at the moment. Whether it's more rectangular than square is okay, just as long as you get it kind of in the ballpark. We're not too concerned at the moment, because we can always be more precise in our later drafts once we've had a go at actually doing the activity. So that's one thing that you've got to get used to with art is you do it once and then you do it again and again and again and again, and you get better at it through practice and repetition, as long as you're critical of yourself or you get feedback from somebody on how you can improve. All right, that circle's pretty good. I'm going to leave this one for the moment. We'll come back to that later, but the circle and the triangle are where we're going to start. Now, to get your perspective lines to begin with, the first thing you want to do is place your pencil on that X right there. Bring your ruler up so that it can pivot around easily. And you're going to find the point at which it actually starts touching the square, which is here. See our point over here? This is where it starts touching the square when we're rotating around. This is going to be our first perspective line. So we're drawing a very light perspective line. Don't do it thick because we're going to be erasing this later. So we've done one. And we're then going to go to the other side and we're going to find that point at where it meets on the other side. So here's the point where the ruler starts passing through the object. There. I'm just going to move my water bottle. And then the next section, or the next part that we're going to do, is find the vertices or the vertexes on our square. Now our vertex or our corner is here. So for every vertex that is inside of this section or this surface, we're going to rule a line to that. And there we go. So now what we've done is we've created a rectangular prism that is so long that it goes all the way back to the horizon line. It's going back into the page in perspective, all the way back to the horizon line. It's so long that it's just lost on the horizon. We're going to do the same thing with our triangle. So I'm going to place my pencil down, rotate around until I touch the tip of the triangle at the top, and I go up. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to place my pencil down and rotate around. And that's it there, I think. I'm going to draw a line there. So I didn't get it quite precisely on that point. The precision of this is really important because that's what gives the 3D effect. I can probably start at that point and then rule backwards. Even that small change is going to make a big impact on your image by making sure that you're precise with those points. Okay, here I'm going to put my pencil down, rotate back around, and I'm going to draw down to my line. There we go. For our ball or our circle, I want to do the same thing again that I did with my square and my triangle. I'm going to place my point down here and, oh, you can't really see it. What I'm aiming to do, I'm just going to bring this over here so you can see it a bit better. What I'm aiming to do is rotate around until I start to touch this circle down here. Once I do that, I'm going to draw a line, and it's exactly on that circle there. And then what I'm going to do is rotate around, and I'm going to go until I'm just touching it here on this edge, and I'm going to draw a line. So there we go. And now what we've got is a cylinder that goes all the way back in space, right to the horizon line. For our funky little squiggle here, we're going to do a few different things, but we're going to follow the same process to start with. So the first thing I'm going to do is find the edge here. So the edge here is there, and I'm ruling to there. And down here, my edge is there, so I'm ruling to there. But this is where it gets fun. I've also got an edge here that's going to have some perspective lines attached to it as well. So what I need to do here is find the edge of this part, but I'm only drawing back until it touches the rest of the object. So it goes behind. There we go, like that. And I think that's pretty good there. Okay, later on we're going to do some more edges, but I'll talk about that once we get back to our squiggly object here. Now we're going to, I guess, contain our object a little bit more, so it's not going all the way back to the horizon line. It's going to be a little bit shorter. And this is where it's important to understand parallel lines so that it creates a very convincing 3D effect if we get it correct. But we have to get those lines correct. What we have to do here is find an edge that is that defines the surface here. So here we are defining the surface. What we need to do is draw a parallel line, or find a parallel line back further. It can be back here, it can be here, wherever you want it to be. Make sure it's not too close. Let's say here. We're finding what could be a parallel line along this surface, and we're drawing a line there. Oh, and I moved my ruler. So there we go. So there's my parallel line. Make sure that it's very parallel to this one. Otherwise, it's going to look very incorrect. If we do it down here like this, it's going to look very strange. So here I need to find a parallel line for this edge that also connects to this point here. So I'm going to place my pencil down and I'm just going to pivot around until I think I'm parallel. I think that's about right. And I'm going to draw across there, still staying with inside that surface that we defined earlier. So now we've got a rectangular prism where we've defined this. So I can actually go ahead now and erase these inside lines, because we're not going to need those anymore. And I've now created a three-dimensional object from simply some lines going back to the horizon line and creating some parallel lines here for this edge and this edge. So now we've defined our 3D rectangular prism. Over here with our triangle, next, I need to find a parallel edge for this edge here. So I'm going to bring my ruler over and I'm going to look and try and guess what would be a parallel edge. I think that's going to be a parallel edge there for this one. So I'm going to rule a line down there and I'm going to put a little mark there because that's my vertex or my corner. And then from there, I'm going to try and get a parallel line happening for this edge there. So this line should be parallel. Now I'm not sure if that's entirely 100% parallel. I might be going a little bit too down that way. So I'll just try and tweak that slightly. There we go, that's better. And now what I can do is erase those extra lines and I will end up with a triangular prism. There we go, there's our triangular prism. Now here's where things get a little bit trickier. We've done our parallel edges here, which have worked really well for us, but what happens when we come to a circle? Well, there's a special trick that you can use to practice drawing your circles so that you get one that's reasonably accurate, but is actually back here and slightly smaller. So I'm just going to switch back to my main camera. And the trick to drawing circles freehand is not to use your wrist, because rotating from your wrist doesn't draw very nice circles. The trick is to actually rotate from your shoulder. So rotating from your shoulder gives you a nice pivot point to pivot around. You keep your wrist very stiff so that it's locked in place, and you're just rotating your shoulder. And by rotating your shoulder, you're giving your hand here something to pivot around, and that allows you to draw some really great circles. So I'm still bending my arm a little bit when I do that. I'm still sort of taking my arm out and bringing my elbow out and bringing it back in. But I'm pivoting from my shoulder and my elbow rather than my wrist. And I'll show you what that looks like. So if I come back here, I'm going to just simply, let's put this up here. I'm just simply rotating from my shoulder. And you can see that I'm not making any marks here, because what I want to do to start with is get used to that circle motion before I put my pencil down. So very gradually, and making sure that I'm just resting this part of my hand very lightly on the desk so that it's sliding over the page. Actually, I'll do it up here. So it's sliding over the page. I'm just going to very lightly draw in a bit of a circle. Now this is really light so that if I make a mistake, I can redo it. So you might hopefully be able to see that, but that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to draw a circle that touches these two lines at some point. So I'm just sort of getting an idea for what that might look like. And then I'm going to gradually, lightly put my pencil down and try and get that in there, like that. So I've kind of got that down now. And this takes a little bit more practice than just doing it as a once-off. So you might find that you have to do this a few different times to get it right. If you have a compass, it's going to be a lot easier. What you can do if you have a compass is find your middle point of your circle, and I'm just pretending that this is the middle point here. And what you can do is find the base of your circle and the top of your circle, which we've got here, and you can draw a line back from your base. Well, actually, sorry, not from your base. You can draw a line back from the center point there, like that. And anywhere along that center point, if you put your compass down, say at this point here, and you make sure that you're coming up to a point where you're touching the top, and you do a little bit of a circle around, make sure that you can touch that edge and touch that edge. If you can do that, then that's going to give you a better circle. So for the moment though, I'm going to do it freehand. And then what I can do is I can just come around like that. Now make sure you keep that nice circle formation. Don't do something like this, because that's going to not be a circle. You want to keep it really nice and round on that edge so that it mirrors this edge here. So once I've done that, I can erase my lines here and here. And I'm just going to go back over the lines that I drew for my perspective there and there. So they're really clear. There we go. And I'm going to erase all this here. Now I could actually have brought this out a little bit more, just to give it more of that 3D circle. I think I needed, there was a little bit too shallow there, so we'll see how that goes. And I'm going to redraw that. Don't ever be afraid, once you've put a mark down, to go and redraw it again, as long as it's reasonably light. I did that reasonably dark. And then I'm just going to come back in here, and I'm going to redraw in this much more darkly. There we go. So there is my cylinder. Now comes the really fun one, and it gets quite tricky, is our shape here. Now, how do we actually define this? Well, we have to put in a few more perspective lines here, and I'm just going to put my X back in. We have to keep finding these corners so that we can define our next edge that we draw back in space. And we're going to need to do that a few different times. So I'm finding the corner for this shape here and this shape here. And I can also put in some imaginary edges, or some imaginary corners, where I find the top of the curve. So here's a curve here with a corner, and then here is the middle of that curve. We've got a curve here, and I'm not going to draw these particularly. Make sure that you draw these very lightly, because we're going to use these as a guide for our next part, which is to actually recreate the edge shape a little bit further back. This is going to be testing all of your super awesome drawing skills. So there's a top of the edge there. Okay, so I've done that. What I want to now try and do is recreate this curve back a little bit. So it's going to be slightly smaller. And I've got to try and get that same curve happening. And this is going to be tricky. So I'm just going to very roughly making sure that I'm staying very light. And that those lines are helping me to try and match up where the curve is for both of those lines, so I get the same kind of curve through that. So that's kind of getting there. And then here I've got the same one, so I'm trying to find the same distance back again. And I think that's about it, maybe a little bit further that way. And then here we're going to have to try and come down slightly, and we've got that bit coming out and then going down. So I'm trying to recreate that as best I can. It's not perfect, but it's close. And then here I'm going to do the same thing, comes down and over and behind. There we go. So I think that's pretty good. All right. So now I need my eraser, and I'm going to erase that and that and that and all these extra lines here. And I'm going to come back and erase that a bit, bring that back, erase that little line there that we made, this one, that little line there, and that little mistake there. Cool. Oh, I need to get that one. There we go. And I'm then going to go and redraw that bit there, and redraw this bit here, like that, and just go back over that. There we go. And redraw that bit there. There we go. Around line. So this one's a little bit more wobbly because I'm pressing kind of hard. I should probably do this a little bit neater, but oh well. There we go. And then back there. There we go. So there's our 3D shape. And probably bring that down. Constantly going back and sort of reviewing your work and seeing how you might be able to improve it. I think that's about it. That looks good. Okay, so we've now got our triangular prism, our rectangular prism, our cylinder, and our fun little blobby 3D shape here. Maybe I can come back down there. Maybe come back down around a little bit more there. Maybe that's going to do it. I keep finding things that I could improve. But anyway, that's art. Okay, let's go back. So you've had a look there at how to create your own 3D shapes or your 3D objects from your 2D shapes. And it's always just a continuous practice. You're trying to evaluate and look at how you could improve things. So you keep looking back over your work and saying, okay, I could improve that, I could improve this. And then you go back and you try and repeat the whole process again and do it better the next time. And I guess that brings me to something that's super important, and that is how to receive feedback well. Because a lot of people don't receive feedback very well. And it's important that when you're seeking feedback, you're not trying to seek validation that you're the most amazing artist in the world. What you want is valuable feedback that people can give you to help you improve. And some people just want to hear good things about themselves because they treat feedback as an evaluation of them as a person rather than as a way to evaluate where their skills are at so that they can improve. So the worst thing you can do if somebody gives you feedback is get very defensive and tell them how wrong they are and about how stupid they are because they don't understand how much of a genius you are at art, those kinds of things. What you want to do is listen to their feedback, note it down, and see whether you agree with what they're saying. Can what they say help you improve your artwork? If it can, then it's valuable. So always take people's feedback with a grain of salt and ask them clarifying questions to see if you can get a better answer from them. Because if someone says, oh, that doesn't look very good, then you need to actually get them to tell you what they could actually, what sort of advice they would give you to improve it. And they may not know. So if they don't know, then you know that their advice or their opinion isn't particularly good anyway, because they don't actually know how to improve it for themselves. But what you need to do is develop a thicker skin, what's called a thick skin, so that you can receive feedback without feeling personally attacked for it, as long as the feedback is specific. Someone might, unfortunately, try to just attack you and make you feel bad, but understand that they're probably doing that because they feel jealous or insecure about their own skills, and so they're just trying to make you feel bad. And you can brush that off because they don't actually have anything valuable to contribute to the conversation because they're deliberately doing it in a way that's not very helpful. So whenever you're giving feedback, make sure that you're specific in your feedback if somebody asks you as well. Don't make it a general, oh, I don't really like it, because that's not helpful for feedback. So you want to make sure that your feedback when you're giving it is specific, and you want to make sure that you don't take offense when somebody's giving you specific feedback on how to improve, because they're not attacking you, they're trying to point out where you could improve, and that's always very, very valuable. anything where somebody is trying to help you improve, to know where you can tweak what you've done to make it better. So valuable. So that's what I want to leave you with this week, is when you're doing your drawing and asking for feedback, please be open to people's feedback as long as it's specific, and brush off the feedback that doesn't actually give you anything specific to help you improve. And you might try somebody's feedback and it doesn't actually work out, and you realize that they weren't actually helpful. So the next time you might not say, find that you take on board their feedback, and they might keep giving you feedback, but you don't have to worry so much about it. Just receive it and keep working. So there you go. Now, the most important thing though is to enjoy the process. Make sure that you are having fun with the whole process of doing this, because if you're not enjoying it at all, then that's a problem. So you need to find a way to enjoy this process, so that it's the process itself, making these things, that's the fun part, and you get to the finished product and it's very satisfying, but you're having fun during the process. I always find the process of drawing and building and making and engineering things fun. It can be frustrating when you're not sure where to go next, or you're hitting a wall and you're trying to get better and you're trying to understand how to do something. That can be very frustrating, but it's also very inspiring and energizing when you do find that thing that helps you to improve. So have fun, enjoy the process, and I'll see you in the next video.